Alrighty. Hey everyone, this is Patricio here again with yet another abstract webinar. So today I'm really excited to have Jake here from Case Text join us. And before we dive into all these very interesting questions and topics I have around the intersection of AI and legal tech, would love for Jake to actually give a quick background for everyone that may not be familiar with him or Case Text. So, Jake, if you want to kind of start with a quick background, then we can dive right into it.
Sure. I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Case Text. We operated from 2013 to 2023, and we got acquired by Thomson Reuters in 2023. My background is I grew up a coder in the Silicon Valley, found myself practicing law and wanting to apply what I saw was the best in class of technology to the practice of law, where I believe that we could make life a lot better for lawyers and more importantly for their clients. So I started Case Text with that kind of ambition. Over time, for the vast majority of the company's history, we started focusing on artificial intelligence. And obviously that became more and more exciting and more interesting as time went on. And so our company was probably best known for a product called Co-Counsel, an AI legal assistant. That's primarily what we're working on, here at Thomson Reuters.
Got it. So what would you say was the main driver? Was it sort of you wanting to cut down unnecessary time, wasted on nitty-gritty, analysis of text documents, etc.? Or what do you think was like that initial driver when you started? And it sounds like that sort of drive shifted throughout the journey. So I wonder if you could touch on that.
I think what I was most driven by is doing a better job for my clients. And I think a lot of lawyers are driven by this. It's actually not about the time you put in, although time sometimes has an impact. Like I remember staying up sometimes until 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. researching to find something and not being able to find it. And I wouldn't mind putting in the time. I minded that I couldn't find what I needed to tell my clients. And so that to me was the really kind of biggest piece of it. And again, time is about this matters. The faster you find the information, or the faster you do take the next step in whatever workflow you're doing, probably the more time you have to do other important strategic work. So time was a factor, but it wasn't really the lens that I looked through it with.
Got it. So that also tied into the pivots you had throughout the product that you started with and then ended with now. So if you're to kind of sum up the key pivot points, like what do you think were the key pivots you made with Case Text, and if possible, like the why behind that pivot? Yeah.
Well, so the kind of key here is that we definitely pivoted the product a number of times. I'm about to go into that. One thing that never pivoted is the mission and the vision of the company. So from day one, all the way to our acquisition, and even still continuing afterwards, we really cared that lawyers get access to great technology because we believe that would enable them to provide faster, better, less expensive services to their clients. And just like when you give doctors better tools, for example, MRI machines, and they're able to provide better health care to their patients, and so the community's health is the benefit. We believe that we give lawyers these kinds of technologies, and the result will be better justice in this country and globally. And so that's been our focus since day one. The real question is, like, how do you get there? And in the early days, we saw a big challenge of needing to have a lot of content to power some of the most ambitious stuff we're trying to do. So a lot of the focus was kind of building almost, in this sense, almost kind of funny by comparison to where we ended up, but almost like a open source Wikipedia or Stack Overflow, for those who know the reference, or GitHub, open source, free communal sharing of information, of legal information, to try to build up a database that was going to be both less expensive or free, but also incredibly high quality because it's sourced from the community. And the truth is, it didn't work. Like, I think it's like a good thought and a good kind of thought process. Like, if we can make this work, it's going to really benefit the eternities. But unlike it turns out, unlike Wikipedia editors or coders or what have you, lawyers were just not that interested in sharing, in the same kind of way. And so that became the challenge. So we had to switch, and pretty early on, we focused on what was then called artificial intelligence, and now by comparison, it's like almost silly. It's like artificial intelligence means something very different today than it meant 5 or 10 years ago. But automated ways of creating content by reading over legal documents and extracting key points of information, or uh, automated ways of searching for and finding the right information was a big kind of focus of ours for a very long time. Using 5 years ago or 6 years ago, starting 6 years ago, basically ever since this paper came out from Google about this model called BERT, we focused on large language models as we at the time actually just made search a lot better. But the same underlying technology that ends up becoming ChatGPT and GPT-4 is something we've been looking at for more than half a decade. And again, it's kind of different applications than an AI legal assistant, but at the time we saw a lot of promise there in terms of searching and finding information.
Yeah. And I would say this definitely added to the sort of flow change, like workflow change that a lot of these lawyers are experiencing now, and well, law firms in general. And so, we've seen it with the people that we work with in the government affairs, regulatory affairs space, and also the law firms we've talked to. But, if they're used to doing something for 20 years, it's kind of hard to change that, right? Especially if you had a certain way and a certain set of tools they're using for over 20 years. So what were some of the insights or, maybe even blockers that you came across throughout this journey in terms of shifting how people think about the workflow? And if I was somebody at a law firm today that was using the same tool for 20 years, like how do I think about how to change what I'm so used to?
I think actually the easiest thing you do as a product builder is not require people to change.
Hmm.
And so we got progressively better at this as we build our product. But the very last version of our product we thought was like maybe the best epitome of this. The way it works is if you could talk to a human colleague and ask them to do work for you, then you are qualified to use our product. And so, given that most attorneys, not all, but most attorneys know how to talk to other humans and ask them for work in plain English, right? That's a so-called user interface they're very comfortable with already, right? Very comfortable, already know how to talk to other people and ask for help and get work done. Um, you know, then you'd be able to do this.
And if which is actually a good segue into sort of the next set of questions I had around how people think about these what we call like AI tools or AI enabled tools. Do you think we're going to start thinking about these tools less as tools and more as like a full-time employee or contractor? And like, do you think the way that firms and companies buy this software is going to shift a little bit more towards a similar process of like a human, right? Just because the work that is being completed by these tools is very similar to what like a full-time analyst would do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be the case. I think that generally speaking, I'd say that things are probably going to shift in that direction. I was at a meeting yesterday where Sam Altman was giving a presentation. Sam Altman's the CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, who's created ChatGPT and GPT-4 and so on. And he said, the models we have today are the dumbest models we'll ever work with. So I think it's like, a very obvious statement in some ways, but also kind of fascinating because like we think of them right now as like, oh wow, it's pretty darn intelligent for a computer. We're all pretty excited about it, but it's just going to get better and better and better. And so I think it's going to change the interface which people kind of interact with by use technology. The other thing he said that I thought was interesting, just as an aside, uh, is and again, it's kind of an obvious point, but I think it's still fascinating. He says all babies born today uh, are um, never going to be smarter than the smartest AI model. They're never going to be smarter than a computer. Um, so that's the kind of future we're living in.
Yeah, and which was something I've been thinking about. Want to your thoughts on is like this notion of a UI UX, right? Like buttons and sort of like a login that we have to use. Do you think that's just gonna be, trivial at one point down the line? Like, especially in the context of the space that we operate in, whether you're a lawyer, a lobbyist, or someone who's working with like any of these laws or, government documents, like, do you think the notion of like having to have an interface where you're storing files and like redlining documents, you think a lot of that's going to change as well, or maybe some of it will stick?
You know, I don't really know, and I think it's a really interesting kind of moment, and I think there's a good case to be made on either side. I think the case to be made on the side of like there will be basically low or no UI is the ultimate experience in technology is not using technology. That's why, is
Yep.
like in the law firm world, for example, as you graduate to senior partnership levels, and you ask about like, hey, how do you use tools like Westlaw, which is one of the most widely used important tools for legal practice? They go, I haven't used it in a decade. What do they do instead? They talk to their associate and they say, hey, I'd like you to research this question for me. And the
Right.
associate researches the question, comes back with a memorandum answering the question, deeply research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the more kind of senior you are in today's world, the less you're interacting with these kinds of interfaces, and the more you're making strategic, important, decisions. Working with clients, kind of thinking through how you're going to cross-examine the witness, like stuff that you just really can't do. You can't delegate. And I think that that's potentially one vision of the future is everybody will have this kind of assistance, not just the most senior, well-paid kind of partners. Everybody will have an assistant they just delegate the work to. And they don't need to have a UI. You just describe what you want and you get it back. I want a graph that includes X, Y, and Z and shows the change of this over time. And the AI goes away and does a bunch of research and plots the graph and brings you back the graph, and then you have the graph. I need you to redline this contract for me. It understands. Understood. Got it. Good to go. Um, so that's one reason why, like in many, at least for most professional work, and maybe a lot of our personal lives as well, the best UI may be no UI. In a sense, it's just having a conversation with your AI assistant. And I think in some ways, Johnny Ive, the original designer of the iPhone, the rumor is that he and OpenAI or and Sam Altman are working on a new phone based on AI. And you can kind of imagine a world where something exists that's far superior to Siri. And all you do is you pick up your phone and say, hey, call my wife. Easy, right? Siri can do that today. Or you can say, hey, I need to write an email about this, or hey, can you help me like write this chapter of my novel, or whatever. And you're just having a conversation with your phone. There aren't a bunch of apps, really in
Yep.
the same way that there are today. Maybe there are apps in a sense, but it kind of just interacts with them. Okay, so that's like the one version of the other side of it is also kind of interesting, which is like obviously there are UIs for a lot of things for a reason. Even in like normal non-AI life, like there are menus you have at restaurants. It's a user interface, right? There are pick from a menu. You don't have it like read out loud to you. You know, um, you don't have a conversation with it. You just want to see the prices and the items and maybe pictures of the food and like make a decision like that, right? There are a lot of things in regular life where we don't have this kind of delegation conversation, where the products that we're using, whether it be cars or video games or Legos or, where a chat interface is a totally dumb interface, right? Um, and so I think the same is also true of technology products where like there are certainly going to be at least some areas where either you want more control or just faster to click the buttons and turn the knobs yourself than it is to kind of describe it in English to like an associate like or AI associate. Um, I mean I think that for product makers out there, it's going to be about choosing what's the right fit. What are you building? Right? Are you building something that is supposed to be like an AI assistant that you just delegate tasks to and it goes away and does them for you? Or are you building a specialist tool that needs a lot of knobs and buttons to press? And are you building something that like again, like if I was making a website for a restaurant, I would not make it a conversational chatbot. I just make it it would be a button you press that says menu and has all the items on the menu. Um, I think it kind of depends on what you're building and what the user. It ultimately comes down to what the users of your product will find the easiest and and get the most value out of.
Yeah, and to kind of wrap this up, like my last question kind of piggybacks off of that point where that you brought up earlier regarding the associate and the partner, right? Where um, the work that the associate is doing is a lot of the work that our personal AI assistants, right, will do for us. And a lot of people are scared, like, okay, this is going to replace us, right? I mean, I'm of the opinion it's going to supplement a lot of the work, and rather there's like this future where the fast track to being a partner is just accelerated. So I don't know, maybe we just had younger partners at one point just because they don't have to go through the whole like ringer of like becoming associate, etc. But then the process of building up those other skills may have to change. I mean, we're also probably gonna have to see changes in how people are educated, right, through these university systems now that a lot of that work is just going to be done by these models. So I don't know if there's like additional thoughts you had on that, right? It's like more of a supplementing or being able to take on more instead of a replacement, or maybe some things will be replaced. So like, I don't know if you had any final thoughts on that.
Well, I think that there's certainly going to be some of the work that we do will be replaced. And by the way, that's always been true of technology. There used to
Yeah.
be human beings called computers, not like computers, but like human beings called
Oh yeah,
computers.
that's
You
true.
know,
Yeah,
and they used to calculate, and those people are no longer employed as computers because we have computers now, like the kind of computers that we kind of colloquially know. They're computers because they computed numbers. You know, trivially easy. In the accounting profession, can you imagine what it would have been like before Excel, where you have a literal sheet of paper, a spreadsheet, and you had to hand tabulate. There's no click and drag the number down and like kind of populates
yeah,
all the fields, no formulas. You're just doing that all. People don't do that anymore. Thank God, right? And accounting is any kind of indication here. They moved on to dramatically more interesting and difficult and important work, much more important work. The accounting firms, the big four accounting firms, last I heard, had more revenue than I think the top 100 law firms combined. And
wow,
part of that story, I think, is they moved on from hand tabulating, stuff on pieces of paper to strategy consulting and technology consulting, and because I mean they look at the finances and say, hey, I think we can help with a lot more than just the spreadsheets. And I wonder if a lot of professional services are going to grow in that way, find more high value uses of the time than the kind of ditch digging that we're kind of used to. I think people are worried that what happens if the ditch digging is out there? Do I still have a job? And I do think that most people are, especially in the professions, are adaptable and smart, and frankly sit around a lot of the time going, why did I go to law school, for example, to do this? Or why did I go to business school to do this? Like this could be done by a high schooler sometimes, it feels like, you know,
yeah,
like this is a misuse of my talent. I think a lot of people have that feeling after they graduate from law school. It's like I'm sitting here doing document review, doing very basic legal research, reading through contracts and just saying yes or no, does this contract have this or that clause? That kind of work. And it is not glamorous, not interesting. It's, kind of fun in its own way because it's kind of like dull and repetitive, like hitting a tennis ball against the wall or something like that. But like, ultimately not what you went to law school to do. And that's, I think, the work that's going to go away. I do think that there may be some impacts on professional services firms. I mean, this is just a hypothesis. It's really hard to tell how things are going to play out. But my hypothesis is that big firms, for example, exist really for a few reasons. Like why should a company prefer to work with a big firm than, for example, hiring a few in-house people to take care of all their business? Well, the first is scale, and like legal work is kind of like sometimes you get sued, and all of a sudden you need to have put like 20 people on the thing, and then the lawsuit settles, you don't need those 20 people anymore. And it'd be kind of crazy to hire 20 people and then fire them after the lawsuit ends. So instead, going to an outside firm makes sense. So one is scale and the ability to kind of scale up and down. And then the second reason is expertise. There's a lot of value going to a person who has seen the same thing over and over and over again. They've seen 100 employment cases like this year. And they know, by the way, a lot of the most important information will never be in the training sets for these AI models. Like never, right? It's
right,
literally the things you see in real life, conversations you have with a judge, things that are written, but they're not public. Because, and it's like one of those phenomena, as soon as you know something about a subject, you read about it in even really esteemed papers like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or what have you, and they're only getting like 60% right because the really important information is private and behind the scenes and
yeah,
not public. So that's the world that the AI knows. It knows the public world, but it doesn't know it's the world of experience. And so that's what you get when you're getting an outside firm. You get scale and you get experience. And I think that the scale thing is about to go away. You don't need 20 people to handle this topic. You maybe need one person who knows how to delegate effectively to AI, maybe a couple people, right? Um, but you really still need experience. And you need to find people who are really good at mergers and acquisitions or employment litigation or IP, whatever it is. You need those people in your life to handle the legal matters that come up. And so I think that the structure of a big law firm will stop to look like a lot of associates and a few partners, but maybe same number of partners and apprentices who's the future of the firm. They're there to learn and to gain the experience so they can carry the firm forward and continue to keep the firm a going concern for years to come and continue to make revenue for they will do work too, obviously, but their purpose is not just to grind out work until 3 a.m. every day. Their purpose is to learn the strategy and to be kind of from day one intelligent, hardworking, hardworking, yes, because I think that work never goes away, but intelligent, strategic kind of thought partners for their clients. And so I think that I think you might see the nature of how these firms are structured kind of change over time.
Yeah, and maybe, people may be able to sleep more. Recently read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Highly recommend
Yeah,
that book to everyone. And, society would be a little bit less aggressive and a little bit happier if people slept more. So I
it's
think
probably right. But
that's a
I will
hope.
say this: we have had technology that has helped in every profession,
Yeah.
from coding to law to plumbing to whatever. And we are working, at least here in America, other countries are a little bit different. We're working as hard and hard as we've ever worked in the past.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think that the desire to do well by your clients, the desire to move ahead in your career, whatever it is, that's pushing people. I can write a book called Why We Don't Sleep.
Yeah.
you know,
Maybe it's the
there's
growth
a lot of
economy. Yeah.
reasons. Yeah, a lot of reasons why we don't sleep. I mean, for kids, whatever.
Oh, yeah, that's
But
true. That's
like,
true. Yeah.
it's all, I actually think for better or for worse, I mean, I think there's going to be this is going to sound like kind of a crazy thing to say, but I think there will be a time where there is no job that we humans could do better than AI. I think that's a very, very far way away. But like when even the strategy and the experience and so on, it's just better to have GPT 50 or whatever do it. Um, and I think for a very long, I think it's going to be a very long time away because I still think there's going to be a lot of value in the wisdom and experience you get as a person doing a job. But up until that point, I think we're still going to find ways to work ourselves to death. I don't know. I don't know. It's just it's in
Yeah.
the DNA. It's in the DNA. I
It,
think.
the DNA of like just keep growing, like this notion of a circular sort of system is just not.
I think it's how a
Maybe.
lot of people are hardwired. And I mean, I think not
Yeah.
to get too philosophical or whatever, but I think we evolved in a very different context than what we live in today. And
Yep.
if our ancestors were kind of like, I'm good with what I have, I'll just chill, those ones were probably,
Yep.
beat by the ancestors who, uh, you know, worked their butts off, right? So I think it's hardwired in our DNA. I think we're going to be interested
I
in
agree.
working. And I think it's a really interesting question. What happens when we no longer need to work at all? Um, you know, uh, I think that's going to be an interesting question, but I think for a very long time we're not going to deal with that.
I think that's where we then sleep, or we destroy the world, or both at the same
Or
time. So,
something
anyways,
exactly, exactly.
but listen, Jake, this was great. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this webinar, and yeah, we'll be chugging along here with everything we're doing at Abstract, and wishing you the best with case text and everything at Thomson Reuters. So thank you again, man.
Thank you. Talk later.
All right, bye.